Well, hello and welcome to another in the series of Cafe Insights. I'm Andrew Vine, CEO of the Insight Bureau, and today I'm at the Fullerton Hotel here in Singapore with adventurer Rob Lilwall. How are you?
Very well, thank
Good,
you.
welcome to Singapore.
Thanks.
Rob's originally from the UK, now lives in Hong Kong, and is the author of a couple of books and speaks at various conferences around leadership. So, Rob, tell us a little bit about the big adventures you've done.
Well, I've done two particularly big adventures. The first one was a bicycle ride where I had decided I wanted to go on a very long bicycle ride, but instead of setting off from England where I lived, I flew as far away from home as I could think of, which was to northeast Siberia, and then I spent about 3 years cycling back home again. I went through places like Russia in the winter and Papua New Guinea, Afghanistan, had tons of adventures and finally got home. And the second big adventure I did was a walk where I flew from where I now live, which is in Hong Kong. I flew up to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and then I walked home, which took me 6 months. Again, I was in the winter at the beginning in the Gobi Desert, walked the length of China, which was, I have to say, it was harder doing the walk than the bicycle ride.
Wow. Well, I left England in 1988 and I went to Australia and I never returned, but I didn't have half of the adventures that you had. But I must say, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but when I heard about this guy who'd walked from across Mongolia and China and cycled across Siberia and Afghanistan, I was kind of expecting some gung-ho kind of Royal Marine type, and you're not, are you?
No, I'm pretty ordinary. Actually, before I started doing these adventures, I was a geography high school teacher, and when I've never been the sort of person who was in the top sports teams or never been a very brave person. I used to get frightened of things very easily, and I still do. So I found on these adventures it wasn't about me being super tough and being able to get through the obstacles. It was much more about my mindset, my attitude that I took to the challenges.
Well, clearly it hasn't held you back. And then, of course, many of these things that you've learned along the way is what you can now help others with. I've listened to you speak about your journeys, and it's extremely personable, and it's a very honest story. But it's not just about you. That's the thing. It's about your exploits, but it's how you draw your audience in, I think, relating to their worlds too.
Yeah. I think there are a number of different things I learnt along the way. I've heard it said the job of a storyteller is to tell the truth, and so I really feel like I've got to be honest about how I felt, the doubts, the fears, the times I almost gave up along the way, and I reflect on some of these, I call them attitudes of adventure, that I learnt along the way, and those would include things like having a resilient mindset, practicing self-care, so looking after myself, learning how to network with people. Actually, rather than use the word network, I like to say, remember, we don't have to make it on our own, because although on these adventures I was usually on my own, I couldn't make it on my own. I had to learn to ask for advice, to receive help. And actually I find, speaking at corporate conferences, these little lessons I share seem to really connect with the corporate world, though their context is so different.
Yes, I remember you saying, that we're all on some kind of adventure, and it's about how we apply ourselves to that. You mentioned a few of them, but perhaps you can go into a little bit more detail about some of the examples that you give.
Yeah, so there are all sorts of different ways I learnt about these lessons kind of intuitively as I went along. That one, for example, would be when I was in the depths of winter in Siberia, and I knew, this was at the start of the journey, I had a 3-year goal to cycle back to London, which is great to have a long-term goal, but sometimes a long-term goal is just too big and too kind of depressing, and you've got a long way to go. So I broke it down. What's my medium-term goal is to get to Russia before my visa runs out. Then I ended up having to break it down into my day-to-day goal, which at that point was I had to cycle 67 miles every day on these really bad quality roads to hit those other goals. And I found that in the rest of life as well. I need my long-term goal to know where I'm going, but sometimes you have to break it down, though, day-to-day, what you're really looking to try and do. Another one was when I was in Papua New Guinea and I was trying to find a boat. I was doing this whole expedition without flying. I was hitchhiking across the sea on boats. Right. I was trying to find a boat from Papua New Guinea to Australia, and I ended up just having to meet so many different people asking them, do you have a boat? And everybody would say no, but you should meet my friend Andrew, he might help. And then Andrew would introduce me to his friend Keith, who would then introduce me to his friend Pete, and it was this huge chain of people I went through to find a boat. And it just taught me the power of learning to ask, to follow up leads, and then you finally find your boat.
So that's goal setting and
the networking.
And one of the things that is your claim to fame is that you were noticed by National Geographic.
Yeah, I had some good fortune there. I on the first trip, the cycling trip, I just self-filmed myself by balancing my camera on a rock and cycling past it and doing video diaries. So it was very much a self-filmed effort. Yeah. But when I got back to London, I had a fortunate break where National Geographic got in touch and bought my self-film footage, made a 6-part series, and then when I did the walk, they actually pre-commissioned a 4-part series, which added new challenges, having to film it at a more professional level, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. And recently you've just come back from your latest little adventure with Christine, your wife, where you cycled across America.
Yeah, this was actually Christine's idea. We've been married a few years, and I've gradually got Christine doing more adventures, but usually only for 1 or 2 nights, maximum 2 nights in a tent. But then about a year ago she had this idea, why don't we go on a big expedition? So we went on a tandem bike, which worked very well for us.
So you had to stay together, right?
We had to stay together, and it meant we were on the same team. It wasn't like we were sort of, oh, why are you going so fast, why are you going so slow? Together we will get up this hill, or whatever the challenge was. And we started in Los Angeles in March, and then just end of August we made it to New York, so it was a great joint adventure.
Terrific. Okay. Well, that's really great to hear. Well, we look forward to hearing more of your adventures in the future. Hopefully we'll see you back in Singapore very soon.
Brilliant. Thanks so much,
all the best.
Andrew. Thanks.